Guys, welcome to my channel. My name is ReadingBear and I hope you are ready for some more stories. And today, we'll take a look at some new entitled people content. If you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comment. And now, let's dive right into the stories.
The first story is titled, "No One Messes with My Dog." I live in a small town where everyone knows each other. I have a beautiful house on the outskirts of town with a large garden where my dog and I love to spend time. I work as a park ranger, and my job keeps me outdoors most of the time. My dog is my constant companion, and we have an unbreakable bond. One day, while on a hike with my dog, I found a wolf trap set up near a path that was frequently used by hikers and their pets. I removed the trap and reported it to the authorities, hoping they would take action against the trapper. But nothing happened, and the traps remained. I soon learned that the traps belonged to a man who lived on the edge of town. I went to speak with him, but he refused to remove the traps, claiming that he had a right to use them. I knew I had to take matters into my own hands to protect my dog and other pets. A few days later, I was out with my dog again when she ran off to chase a squirrel. When I heard her barking in distress, I knew something was wrong. I ran towards the sound and found her caught in one of the traps I had removed earlier. I freed her, but I was furious. I knew I had to take drastic measures to stop this man. I contacted a friend who worked at a nearby construction site, and he agreed to help me. We went to the area where the traps were set up and removed them all, including the ones that were hidden. We also dug up the area and buried the traps, making it impossible for the trapper to find them. A few days later, I received a call from my neighbor who was also a trapper. He was angry and threatened me, saying that I would regret my actions. I didn't take his threats lightly, so I reported him to the authorities again, hoping that they would take swift action this time. A few weeks later, while on patrol, I found a new trap set up near the hiking trail. I was angry and frustrated, but I knew I couldn't let this continue. I removed the trap and took it to the authorities as evidence. Finally, after months of fighting, the authorities took action against the trapper, and he was forced to stop. My dog and other pets were safe once again, and I knew that I had done the right thing. Update. A few years have passed, and I still think about that time often. I have since moved to a new town, but I still visit my old home and go on hikes with my new dog. I heard that the trapper had moved away, and that the area was now safe for pets and hikers. It's amazing what a little bit of determination and hard work can accomplish. The next story is titled, "Jerk with Boat Parks Across 5 Handicapped Spaces and I Call the Cops." I used to be a stock car racer. I quit when I was hit and slammed into a wall and fractured a vertebrae. Every Friday we would race and then stop at a 24-hour restaurant that had lots of parking so we can park the truck and car hauler and still see it. The restaurant is also one-half window, so it's easy to see your car or truck with trailer no matter where you park. One fine day we drive to that restaurant for dinner by car. I have a handicapped placard, but there is a truck with a boat, parked across all 5 handicapped spaces. I call the cops. I have a handicapped placard, spine surgeries, and it ticks me off when people do this. After we gave our order, a police officer arrives. Cue the drama. The boat owner observes the officer outside and goes out to meet him. We couldn't hear the conversation, but there was a lot of gesticulating by the boat owner. Officer hands him some paper and departs. Boat owner returns to the restaurant and he is ticked. Like, "I stormed the Capitol," kind of rage. He starts going off at the restaurant employees who assure him that they didn't call. He doesn't accept that and is screaming at a bunch of teenage employees. I stand up and said, "I called them." He then turned his rage on me. I grew up with a father who had anger issues, so this guy was nothing new. I've learned to lean into these things and called him out for being an entitled jerk who thought giving his boat special treatment was okay. I pointed out the spaces we used to park our race car, perfectly visible, so why be an ass and take 5 handicapped spaces? He called me a bunch of names and then his 3 boating buddies stepped in and said it was time to leave. Turned out he got 5 tickets, one for each spot, at $250 each. A very expensive lunch. Maybe next time his gray matter will remind him to be a better person, and avoid $1,250 in fines. The next story is titled, "Entitled Couple in Handicapped Section." Picture it. 2008, a Midwestern mall with a movie theater and Twilight had just come out. I was around 13 at the time and I wanted to go so badly. The only issue was my mother wouldn't let me go by myself. She made my older sister go with me. Now some quick context. My sister is severely physically disabled and requires the use of a motorized wheelchair. She has an extremely rare form of MD that even mentioning it would potentially out her identity. She is an amazing sister and begrudgingly agreed to be my chaperone, despite being a much cooler, older teen than I was. Unfortunately, my sister requires around-the-clock care. On a good day when no one calls off, she has an aide, or assistant, during the day and a nurse at night. The nurse who drove us there is a phenomenal Amazon of a woman who was a combat vet and towers over most people. She was making fun of the movie the whole drive, but she was secretly excited to see it. This was back in the day before you could select your seats. We got to the theater plenty early, but there was still a long line down the mall hallway to get tickets. When we got up to the counter, the nurse asked if the handicapped section was open. The ticket person responded that it had to be. They only allowed wheelchair users to use that area during high-interest movies on opening night. I'm not sure if you've ever sat in the handicapped section, but I couldn't stand it. The seats are almost always too close to the screen, and I always felt like people were staring at us, mortifying to a preteen. So I could not grasp why the section was not only open, but completely full of non-wheelchair users when we got in, despite there being other seats open. There is a plethora of reasons why someone could need to sit here that may not be visible to others. However, there is one specific seat that is purposely designed for a wheelchair to fit in, and out of the way of the aisle, with 2 seats next to it for their companions. The 3 of us approached the couple sitting in these seats, and you could already tell the woman was mortified. She started gathering up her things to move, but her boyfriend stopped her. Nurse. Excuse me, sir, sorry to ask, but we have a wheelchair and kind of need those seats. Man. Can't she go over there? Points to a random empty space with no seats around it. Nurse. She has to have someone by her at all times. Man. Well, you guys should have gotten here earlier then. Nurse. This is how it's gonna be, huh? The nurse then told me to stay with my sister and left to grab the manager. The manager comes back in and takes one look at my sister, looks at the couple, and is clearly shocked. Manager. Sir, you have to move. Man. We got here first. Manager. I understand that, but these seats are reserved for wheelchair users. Man. This is BS, you all take the best seats and save them for people who can't even understand the movie. Me. Sister's name, can you understand the movie? Sister. Well, I didn't read the book. Me. Oh my god, she can speak. Manager. Nervously looking back and forth between us and the couple. Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. If you don't, I'll have to get security and you will not get a refund on your ticket. Man. Go ahead, I'm not moving. And so, the manager did just that. The guy seemed to have no problem getting up when this big, hulking man came and made him. All the while our Amazonian protector was staring daggers down at him. I feel a little bad for the girlfriend as she apologized profusely as they were leaving. The manager came in clutch and gave us free tickets, so all was well in the end on our side. But seriously people, if you're going to have the audacity to sit in a section clearly designed for those less able-bodied than you are, please move if someone who needs it shows up. The next story is titled, No Money Back? We'll see about that. I'm not 100% certain this is a malicious compliance, but I'll let you be the judge. A few years ago, when my kids were 3 and 7, we were looking for a new car for my wife. After scouring Auto Trader, we are in the UK. We saw a Mazda Exito 6, decent mileage, couple of owners, in a small Traders down south. It was about an hour away, so we hopped in my car and went to look at it. We arrived at the site, which had some decent looking cars, and it was a nice and tidy place so didn't ring any alarm bells. We were greeted by one of 2 Romanian brothers who seemed knowledgeable, and pretty free of the hard sell. I had a look round the car, very little rust, oil looked clean, tidy inside with not too much wear. The only 2 things I found was the head unit panel was not in place correctly, and one of the brackets by the engine had a bit of a dent in it, but it was a non-functional bracket and it didn't appear to have a prang, so okay. Took it for a test drive and it was okay. My wife liked it, so we paid part cash, part card. A few days later after sorting the insurance, we went and collected it. By the time we got home my wife got out and immediately said, "There's something wrong with this car." I took it for a drive and yes, it had low power, sounded terrible and didn't feel safe. I immediately rang them, and they were pleasant enough, and said bring it back and they would have their garage look at it, the same garage that had modded it barely 2 weeks earlier. I said I didn't want to bring it back and would pay out of my pocket to get it assessed by my garage. They didn't like this, but I didn't give them a choice. After a couple of days of being at my local garage who we have used for years and trust, even though they are a bit pricey, we got the report. It ran to 2 pages which I will summarize using the comment the mechanic gave us when we picked it up. Mechanically, this is the worst car I have ever seen. How it passed in Mo is beyond me. You wouldn't have seen it on a visual inspection, but this is a nail. Oh dear. So, I rang the dealer and sent them the report. Again, pleasant enough, said bring it back and we can discuss it, and sort out the refund. Cue the MC. So, the following Saturday, now 1.5 weeks since we bought it, we all trooped back down there, and walked into their little Portocabin office. The 2 brothers were sat there with faces like slapped asses. I will tell you now sir, you will not be getting a refund today, not until our garage has checked it. My wife and I looked at each other and our hearts sank. What followed was an hour of back and forth, with me explaining that we were within our rights to a full refund within 30 days of purchase. Now this is true for goods in the UK, but I had no idea if this applied to vehicles. After an hour my wife and I stepped outside. The kids were getting bored and fractious. What are we going to do? Says my wife. Well, I'm not leaving without a refund. I said. Agreed. And that was it. We went back into that office, we argued back and forth, revisited the same point over and over while the kids moaned, cried, begged to leave. But we sat there, and we argued, very calmly, very matter-of-factly, without getting angry or raising our voices. At a couple of points, one brother left to serve people who had walked into the yard, and at one point he came in with another couple who were interested in a car. They heard us talking. I slyly shook my head at the couple, and they backtracked and left. One of the brothers was raging behind his eyes. They threatened to call the police. I begged them to do it so we could clear this up and leave. They didn't. After, and I am not exaggerating, 5 hours of this, my wife and I stepped out and were stood just outside the office door. Look, we can't stay here much longer. The kids are hungry and tired and mental. My wife says. I saw the door open barely an inch. Okay, take my car and go and feed them. I'm not leaving. I think I'll just call the police and get this sorted. But if I have to stay here until tomorrow morning, we are getting our money back. I said. I noticed the door close again. Really? She said. Just give it a minute, let's go back in a second. Okay, she says looking irritated. We go back in, and one brother is counting out cash on the table. At this point it's early evening. Sir, the deal we will do is, we will give you a full refund, if you don't mention this car on any review site. It was X in cash and X on a card, yes? Less than 5 minutes later we were back in our car leaving the nail behind, cash in hand and card refunded. We had found a pub that does food and were heading there rapidly. The kids were okay now they knew food was near. With everything sorted my wife and I looked at each other for a second and cheered, whooped, hollered, banged the steering wheel, making the little lad cry bless him. We could not believe that after 5 hours of back and forth, crying kids, belligerent salesmen, we had won. We had flipping well won. This sort of thing never happened to us, and yet there we were. We felt like the kings of the world, and no one would ever mess with us. Quick edit. Wow, thanks for the comments and upvotes. A lot of people are saying I should name and shame. You are right, I probably should have, but I didn't, and it was 5 years ago. So, I can't even remember the name of the place or the garage where the mow was done. I can't imagine they stayed in business long, to be honest. The last story is titled, Throw Me Under the Bus? Nah, I don't think so. I work for a medical equipment company, specifically in the contracting department. We handle paperwork for million-dollar instruments globally, and I handle half of the United States in my territory. It can be challenging, and if a customer fails to sign an agreement it can cost them hundreds of thousands of dollars a day if something breaks. And if they fail to sign because of ME, then that can come back to bite my company in the ass, because we might have to pay for the repair ourselves. This hasn't ever happened yet, just a potential consequence. I'll knock on wood now, so I'm fastidious about my work. Half an hour ago I got an email from one of my account managers, we'll call him Hank. Subject line once directly hostile, but it was marked important and listed a bigger account. Hank emailed me wanting to know why a contract hadn't gotten to the customer, basically asking, hey, this is way past due, and it's your fault, care to explain yourself? He CC'd his boss and my supervisors so they could all see my big mistake. I dug and looked, and he was right. The customer's contract expired 8 months ago. A little more digging and I found out he emailed me about this customer's equipment last September. So, I reread the email chain. It was a conversation from half a year ago, after all. Luckily for me, I keep all my emails filed perfectly, account by account, and even color-coded in each folder based on info and subject. It's tedious, but it can definitely come in handy if I ever need to look back for any reason. Then I send him a response. Hey Hank, these are the 2 equipment pieces you asked about back on 9/10, correct? The ones that were outside my scope. In the last email I'd seen from you about that, attached, you'd said you were putting together a contract for that equipment, because my team doesn't handle these types of contracts, which I confirmed for you in the attached email from 10-20 seconds. If I've let something slip through the cracks here, don't hesitate to ask. Always happy to help. I then attached the email where I'd told him I wouldn't be handling this because it wasn't my job, and also attached the email where he acknowledged I was correct and said he would handle this himself. I kept both of our supervisors CC'd. After all, he'd been the one who added them. I basically told him, yeah, you did ask about that, and we determined it was in no way my job and definitely something you should handle, and you said you'd handled that 6 months ago. Did you not handle it like you said you would? In front of our bosses. And now Hank's boss can start his day by reading about how Hank promised a customer a contract half a year ago and then never followed through. I suspect that Hank will be meeting with his boss in a few hours to discuss this. It's gonna be a tough day for Hank. Anyone tries to throw me under the bus, I'm ready with a judo flip. I ain't going out like that. Thank you for listening.